And the very first point I want to make is that whenever we go from transitioning from one way of being towards another, it requires belief in yourself, time, patience, conscious effort. And I think one of the most important ones, because sometimes it can get tricky, is compassion with yourself. So my journey began in 2020 at the onset of the pandemic. And at the time, I was working in healthcare and as an employee in the same place for 12 years, working hard, doing the daily grind, living on autopilot mode. But I used to always wonder to myself, is this it? And on the flip side of that, I also sometimes used to wonder what it would feel like to work for myself from the comfort of my own home while still being able to serve others. But if that could happen and how that could happen was unknown to me at the time. And so there I was doing my daily grind. The pandemic happened. We had a shutdown. My center closed for what happened to be several months. And so I was stopped dead in my tracks with no choice but to reflect on where my life was headed. And it was during this time like the magic happened and life introduced me to the Jay Shetty Certification School, where I enrolled. I learned about coaching. I grew fond of coaching. Long story short, I graduated. And soon after, I went on to establish my coaching practice, right, called Best Self Forward. So here I was, ready to start this like entrepreneurial journey, but there were some setbacks that I wasn't aware of. So what was happening was that as excited as I was struggling to shift and accept a new identity, that I was trying to create for myself, that of a salary-based employee who was used to receiving permission from her boss, to that of an entrepreneur who takes lead and takes full charge. And so every time I was trying to press the gas pedal, I was slamming on the brakes at the same time, and I wasn't making any movement. So what did I do and how did I begin this transition? I began by asking myself some powerful questions. The first one being, what does being an entrepreneur mean to me? And so when I reflected on the definition, I thought of an entrepreneur as someone who is there to serve others through their services in an effort to help solve real life problems. And in the means of doing so would be open to opportunities and create opportunities in order for that to happen. So in that definition, I started to see where I was and what I needed to start moving towards. Second question I asked myself was, what are those qualities that I already have within me that are entrepreneurial in nature? And as I began to list them, what this allowed me to do was see my own resourcefulness and my belief in myself started to increase. And so my first learning point for you guys is look at the qualities that you already have within you because they're there, tap into them, and then don't hesitate to put those qualities into practice. And then my third question, or actually questions, was that if I am to be an entrepreneur, who do I have to become? And what do I need to let go of? And so for me, I had to actually let go of this passive way of being and like waiting on the sideline, like my old employee way of being. And I needed to start to become more disciplined and more proactive. And I needed to start to create opportunities in order to help make the impact that I wanted to. And I also needed to let go of this feeling of needing permission from my boss, because that was also very strongly imbibed in me when I was after working for someone for so long. So the first point I want to just quickly highlight here that stood out for me was that when I made that transition, see, we take for granted that when we work for somebody else, we have a schedule and a structure already set up and made for us. So when I was there on day one working for myself, the first thing that I noticed was that I had this whole schedule ahead of me with nothing in it, and days and calendars with nothing in it that was waiting for me to create something. And sometimes like that can feel very overwhelming when you don't know like where to start. So my first quick pointer is that if you're feeling this way, just create some boundaries, like create a start time for your work to start and an end point, and maybe some breaks in between so that you can start to separate your work life from your home life. And then just choose 2 or 3 tasks that you feel is doable for you that you can get done in the day, so that by the end of the day, you can say to yourself, hey, I did what I said I was going to do, and that will start to increase your self-assurance. Now, so hopefully you find that tip helpful. And I just want to quickly move on to limiting beliefs because that was a big part. Usually when we talk about mindset shifts, right, we surface the limiting beliefs, we examine what they're trying to tell us and if they're even valid. And then eventually we reframe the story in a way that empowers us to move forward. So what I was actually doing in the past was I used to unknowingly say things to myself like, I am not cut out for business. I am not cut out for sales. I'm not cut out for marketing. I'm not an extrovert, therefore I won't be successful. And yeah, it goes on. But when I was able to take a step back and look at what I realized was the language that I was using. It's not so much that I wasn't cut out for, but it was just more that I needed to learn how to. So when I reframed to I can learn to, I started to unstuck myself. And the how came to me in two forms. The alumni community had a business mentoring workshops hosted by Mira. And then another gift came in the form of the Coach MBA Accelerator Program hosted by Medina and Kavit. And through the guidance of all three of them, I was able to learn the skills and the tools necessary to propel myself forward. And so my learning point here for you guys, what I want to highlight is that whenever you sometimes feel self-doubt, listen to what it's trying to tell you, because sometimes it could just mean that you need to learn something or just learn another skill. And if that's the case, then don't hesitate to learn it. Sign up for that course, read a book, whatever you fit for yourself, or take that action. And then there's also those limiting beliefs that I like to call loud noise, because we feel them in our whole mind body system and we believe in them so propensely, but what they really do is they get in the way and prevent progress. And so some of those fears for me was like fear of putting myself out there. Fear of success was another one. But instead of mapping out for you how I navigated through each one of these, I just want to share one last learning with you, which is probably the most important one. And you probably heard this one throughout the whole week because it is that important. That's remembering your why and why you got into this in the first place. See, what I realized was that whenever my doubts and my fears would come to surface, what I was doing in essence was taking my ego self, so I call it, and putting it at the forefront of the equation and focusing on that. And so, what helped me get out of my own head and pivot focus in those moments was to really remember why I was doing this in the first place, which was to serve. So, when your why and your mission become very important to you, this noise starts to take a seat in the background. And it's almost like this higher part of you takes charge and takes control of the steering wheel. So, as a relationship mindset transformation coach, yes, I do work with singles and I work with their mindsets when it comes to finding love. But my bigger mission is to help create a world where we stop getting in our own way and we start to focus more on what's possible than what's impossible, and a world where we start to align with ourselves more authentically so that we can form deeper connections with one another, because that's what will help lead to more fulfilling relationships. And if you think about it, um, everything in life really is a form of is a form of a relationship, whether it's with yourself or whether it's with other people. But before you embark on any transformational journey, always remember to start here with yourself first. I thank you so much for listening.